Let's turn, though, to the vice presidential debate. Susan, we all saw you. You worked so hard to bring up important issues, including the pandemic. It was also a historic night, the first such debate to feature a black woman, Senator Kamala Harris of California.
Would you impose new lockdowns for businesses and schools and hotspots? A federal mandate to wear masks?
They knew what was happening and they didn't tell you. Can you imagine if you knew on January 28th, as opposed to March 13th, what they knew, what you might have done to prepare? They knew and they covered it up. They still don't have a plan. They still don't have a plan. Well, Joe Biden does. And our plan is about what we need to do around a national strategy for contact tracing, for testing, for administration of the vaccine, and making sure that it will be free for all.
How can you expect Americans to follow the administration's safety guidelines to protect themselves from COVID when you at the White House have not been doing so?
The difference here is President Trump and I trust the American people to make choices in the best interest of their health. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris consistently talk about mandates. We're about freedom and respecting the freedom of the American people.
Susan, beyond the headlines about that fly on the vice president's head, what would you have as the headline? You were there in the room.
I'm the worst person in the world to judge the headline because I was so focused on the moment. Speaking of the fly, so we have this 90-minute debate, the biggest issues facing the nation. I walk off stage afterwards, all excited. What are people talking about? Everybody was talking about the fly. And I was like, what fly? I never saw the fly.
But what mattered at that debate? I mean, vice presidential debates historically have often not had a huge impact, but you have two nominees now that are over 70 years old.
Yes, I think that this debate mattered more, got more attention, got higher ratings than most of the previous ones because of that fact. Either of these candidates for vice president, if their ticket wins, have every chance of becoming president. Joe Biden will be 78 on Inauguration Day. President Trump will be 74. So that raised, I think, the stakes for this debate. Now, I think also the fact that Kamala Harris, the senator from California, not a well-known figure nationally until this point, people might want to tune in to see if she was someone they might feel comfortable putting a heartbeat away from the presidency. So maybe that gave this debate a little more resonance than vice presidential debates sometimes have.
Yamiche, we wanted to show those clips about the pandemic because that is the issue, as Jerry said, in this election, as we all have been covering. What's your read on how the head of the coronavirus task force, Vice President Pence, handled the debate, and what's the review inside of the White House?
Well, the review inside the White House is that they feel like Mike Pence did the best that he could when it came to defending the president's strategy. I think the thing that should be noted here is that the coverage that would have been not only the fly but the policies, that was all stepped over because President Trump decided to go on Fox News and give a very long interview about all the different things that he thought of. But going back to the debate, the thing that struck me the most about watching Mike Pence was that he's the smoother, he's less brash, less combative. Definitely interrupted a lot, definitely gave Susan a run for her money when it came to adhering to the rules. But he was someone who was defending the Trump White House with a smoother delivery, but with the exact same talking points that we've heard from the president. So he said at one point that Senator Harris was the one playing politics with people's lives. He also said that we've always been honest with the American people. What we know is that the president has admitted that he downplayed the virus. He says to Bob Woodward that he didn't want to panic the American public. The point is that he was not always transparent, did not always say what he meant. Another thing is I was struck by how many questions didn't get answered by both Senator Harris, but especially, of course, by Vice President Pence. He didn't talk about what the health care plan for the Trump administration will be, if it will actually come out before Election Day. He didn't answer the question of whether or not Americans have the right to know how President Trump is doing in terms of his COVID-19 diagnosis. And surprisingly, he would not commit to a peaceful transfer of power, which got a lot of headlines when President Trump did it. But because Mike Pence did it in maybe a little less smooth, in a more smooth way, it didn't get the same headlines. But I think all of those things are things that made me sit back and think, this is someone who's a good defender of the Trump administration with a different kind of style.
That brings up an issue that Vice President Biden has not addressed on the campaign trail. Senator Harris didn't address it at the vice presidential debate, whether the Democratic ticket, the Democratic nominees want to pack the Supreme court. Let's listen to Vice President Biden this week on that question.
They'll know my opinion of court packing when the election is over. Now, look, I know it's a great question, and I don't blame you for asking it. But you know, the moment I answer that question, the headline in every one of your papers will be about that. Other than focusing on what's happening now.
Jerry, I'm told by my Biden sources that they don't want to answer it because if they say, yes, they want to pack the court, they'll maybe alienate some more centrist voters. If they say they don't want to pack the Supreme Court, they'll alienate liberal voters, some of them who sat on the sidelines in 2016. What's going on?
Well, that's exactly what's going on. That's half of the reason the Biden-Harris ticket doesn't want to talk about this. And that, by the way, is an uncomfortable situation for them to be in. They're going to be there until the election happens because they've made this command decision not to address the question. But part of the reason is, as you say, you'll alarm and upset progressives if you say you're not for this plan. You will alarm and upset moderate Democrats and independents if you say you're for this program because some of them think it's too radical. The other reason is I think the Biden team views this as a way by the Republican Party to change the subject, to move the subject away from the attempt by what Democrats think is an attempt to jam through a Supreme Court nominee at the last minute before the election. That no longer is the issue. Supreme Court packing becomes the issue if they answer the question. So what they're trying to do is keep the focus on what they want the focus on, which is to be the debate over Amy Coney Barrett. But I think this is an uncomfortable situation for the Democrats to be in. They're going to get asked this question a lot more. And if there is another debate, you can be sure it's going to be raised prominently by President Trump.
Susan, when Judge Barrett comes before the Senate Judiciary Committee next week, are they going to talk about health care or are they going to talk about her biography and the group she's been part of, like People of Praise?
They're going to talk about health care. They're going to talk about the fact that if she gets confirmed by November 10th, she'll be on the high court when it considers the lost case to strike down the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act, which has provided protections for people with pre-existing conditions to have access to affordable health care. And as Yamiche mentioned, the Trump administration has promised to continue those protections, but they haven't said how they'll do it. And that was one of the questions that Vice President Pence dodged at the debate this week. So that is the primary focus, I think, of Democratic attacks. But I've got to say, at the moment, it looks like she is headed toward confirmation.
And Senator Cruz told me this week the votes are there for Judge Barrett. Yamiche, speaking of dodging debates, just before we came to air tonight, the Commission on Presidential Debates canceled that second debate next week in Miami. Is the president committed to going to that debate, the debate in late October, moderated by our friend Kristen Welker?
Well, soon after the official announcement was made that the October 15th debate was canceled, the Trump administration put out a statement, or I should say the Trump campaign put out a statement, saying that they really want two more debates. They want October 22nd and they want October 29th. Now, it seems as though the debate commission is not wanting to get on board with that. They want to get on board with just keeping the schedule the way it is and essentially bypassing the debate that they think can't be done in person safely. The other thing to note is that the Biden campaign, at least from the last I heard, the Biden campaign, they wanted to keep the dates. They wanted Biden to have this ABC town hall where he can take questions from voters on October 15th and then the last debate on October 22nd. So I think it's the Biden campaign that doesn't want this October 29th debate.